You've got to educate your client, not school them, be a partner with them, but you have to have the nerve, and I'll use that word, to push back on them and say what you're looking for is just not realistic. And sometimes you don't even take the job, but the client that understands that and partners with you on that, they're going to be your best client and they're going to respect you. And guess what? They're going to call you the next time they have a job.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, or at goodmorninghr.com. Back in ancient history, 2021, 2022, you couldn't throw a dead cat without hitting an open rec for a recruiter. Driven by the overheated labor market, companies were desperate to find internal or external recruiters to help them fill positions. The subsequent cooling of the labor market has eased that pressure some, and many companies are now realizing that while their recruiting process was delivering quantity of candidates, the quality wasn't always on the mark. To discuss the current state of the recruiting market and how to get the most bang from your buck, I'm joined today by my friend Mike Kahn. Mike's HR career spans 4 decades, including being an HR practitioner for 22 years and now almost 20 years recruiting HR professionals. He has supported businesses from retail to manufacturing to financial services, with firms as few as 100 employees to Fortune 20 companies. Mike is a past president of HR Houston and a past state director of Texas SHRM, the state HR association, where he and I worked together for several years. I'll add that he's also one hell of a vocalist and a lot of fun at parties. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Mike.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Very glad to be here.
So we're winding down the summer. The third quarter will be over before we know it. What's your take on the job market so far this year, and how's it different from the last couple years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we're seeing a kind of a mixed bag, to be very candid with you. The kind of the tech downturn definitely, a lot of times perception is reality, and other people will pick up on that. So certainly there were a lot of tech individuals that were impacted, but it did give a pause to a lot of different industries. So it has been a guarded job market, I would say. What hasn't changed, quite frankly, is it's always a chore finding the talent you need. I'd say good talent, but that's kind of not. It depends on what your definition of good is. So that hasn't changed a bit, and the need for good qualified candidates is as strong as it's ever been, and that's where we come into play.
Yeah, I think a couple years ago, it wasn't good talent; it was good enough, right? I mean, so many employers were just looking for a pulse, and I've seen it, and certainly our business is actually up this year, even with same year clients. But I'm seeing a real shift, and I'm curious if you're seeing it away from hiring overhead positions. They're really looking for operations roles. They're looking for people who are going to produce revenue rather than, accounting, finance, HR, a lot of those. We're seeing that a lot of the background checks that we're running are, and as I'm talking to clients, the HR leaders say, our executive team is saying, tap the brakes, hold off. We want to see what happens with the election. We want to see what happens with the economy. But we definitely need to do these things that produce revenue. Are you seeing that kind of thing too?
We're seeing similar trends. I won't say that is new though, Mike. I think ever since really kind of COVID, we came out of COVID, we have seen that guarded response to who they bring in terms of more the support or operations type individuals. A little bit more replacement than net new. But I will say one interesting about HR, COVID was actually opened a lot of people's eyes about HR professionals they'd never seen before. So in the HR world, which is my primary realm, Burnett does everything, but in my world, we kind of came out with a new respect in many regards from some companies because of what we brought to the table during COVID. We kind of created something out of nothing, sending people home. What do you do with people that test positive? How do we measure people working at home? So from my, kind of expertise in HR, that has almost been a elevated HR in the eyes of some of the companies that saw us more as just kind of, get people paid and stay out of trouble.
And, I'm probably spending too much time on social media in the HR groups, my favorite being the evil HR lady on Facebook, but there are a number of interesting HR groups for professionals. And I'm seeing that there are a lot of HR professionals who are talking about how difficult the job market is for HR professionals right now. And I get the sense that a lot of those folks are not, and I'm not, no offense to anybody out there looking for a job. It sucks to be unemployed. But as a lot of the anecdotal evidence I'm seeing is that the strategic HR people who are really, truly, truly business partners, truly strategic people are doing better in finding their next role than people that are more transactional. Is that kind of what you're seeing in your searches?
Yeah, well, yes, I could agree to that to a certain degree. I think there is still some learning curve, not like when I first got into HR back in the mid 80s or so. People understand what HR can bring to the table. On the strategic side, a lot of companies are still being educated on what that looks like, how you can impact the business and not just support. So the specialties are still, I'm seeing more trend towards specialties, i.e. Total rewards professionals, people who have expertise even in employee relations versus generalists. So I think the generalist is having a little bit more challenge than those who specialize because they, to your point, they almost have to have a direct outcome. We don't have a compensation analyst. We need a compensate. We don't have a benefits person versus we don't have a business partner.
So those individuals who can address a specific pain that the employers are feeling rather than, because it's funny because I remember early in my career in HR in the 90s, it was everybody don't get a specialization, become a generalist, be that SPHR, that PHR, that broad brush professional, which I think is still probably valuable. But I think what you're saying now is really having that niche, that deep expertise in one area that can relieve an employer's need is really helpful.
Let's say it's a very valid avenue to go where it may not have been before. Now, obviously, you have to be a larger employer to have a comps analyst and not anything else. But there's definitely a path for specialists to get very good jobs, have a very lucrative earning career, quite frankly, to be blunt, and as well as the specialist.
And so narrowing it down to recruiters, there was a time a few years ago where, like I said, in-house recruiters could set their own salaries pretty much. I mean, everybody seemed to be scrambling to find them. And then certainly the recruiting firms were all looking for people because they were getting inundated with employers' resumes. Is my feeling right that some of that's chilled a little bit and it's not as frenetic as it was?
It has chilled, and I think it's a couple of reasons for that. One is the technology and the advanced AI type of. It didn't take long to just get that AI and they did it.
Ding, ding. Drinking game,
Thank you. That's right. But no, seriously, I mean, with the tools that are available, in-house recruiters can be more efficient, just like we can on the external side. So I think there is more efficiency that companies are seeing. And the thing that I've always advocated and I try and do as a search consultant, and that's not a kind of a euphemism for a recruiter. There are recruiters who just get you resumes. What I try and do is educate not only the clients, but even internal HR as to what you should expect from your recruiters. And I'm happy to work with and be an additional resource, not replace them.
Yeah. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of bad recruiters, both when I was in corporate America and working through clients, helping, both internal recruiters, and external. in the early 90s, or when I started my career in the late 80s, there were recruiters who would really go out and beat the bushes. You would get these random calls from people who somehow found you. And this is before, social media, LinkedIn or any of that, who somehow
Right.
found you. You get this cold call from somebody at the office asking if you're interested in changing jobs. And the first time I got one of those, I thought it was a scam. I had no idea. But I think maybe social media, LinkedIn, the job boards have killed some of those skills, or that there's not a lot of folks out there doing that. And, I hear from clients, I use this outside recruiter, they're getting a big fee and what they're sending me are resumes right off Indeed. And I'm like, well, you probably need to vet your external recruiters a little bit more and set better expectations. So what do you think an employer, whether it's an internal recruiter they're looking for to really, fill slots, or outside, what ought they be looking for? How do you evaluate what you're going to get for that?
I refer to it sometimes when I'm training my younger or newer colleagues coming in, the checklist mentality, where somebody gets a job description, let's say, or gets a description of somebody tells them what they want in a job. They say, I want this, and I want this. And so some less experienced, I will say, recruiters, because they don't last long if that's how they operate, they're just not going to be effective. But kind of that checklist mentality, okay, have to have a degree, have to have 5 to 7 years in marketing, whatever it may be. That's not who our clients are looking for. And clients are either internal, again, or external. If you're an internal recruiter, you have to really dig deep. You have to not understand what the warehouseman qualifications for. You need to walk out into the warehouse and see how they work, so that when you talk to potential candidates, you can really dig deep into what they're doing. In a more professional setting, like is the primary what I do, fit is probably 85% of every hire. It's not their background or experience. I tell people somebody can have 50% of what you're looking for, but if they're the good cultural and fit for your company, you might hire them. If they have 100% of all the skills but are not a fit, there's no way you're going to hire them. So to your point about the access to, and LinkedIn is wonderful. It's a gold standard if it's used correctly. But people learn so much from that. They go, oh, this person fits. Yeah, I'll submit them. They don't, if they don't talk to them and really dig deep. When I interview a candidate, it's not about things that are on their resume, validating what they did. It's what's not on the resume. It's how they think. It's what's important to them in the next role, and is it a good match that way? And I think sometimes you get some recruiters where they do most of the talking. I do very little talking in an interview. You want to learn from your candidates. So I don't know if that addresses
I think
some
that's
of the things you're
interesting.
talking about.
And so there's, I've got let's say you're the external recruiter, search firm, and what do let's just talk about you and your experience. How do you get to, somebody may have all, like you said, all the skills, and they may work just fine in company A, but in company B, they're not a good culture fit. They're not, which is, can still be a taboo term, but I think there's such a thing as, having somebody who just doesn't appreciate or enjoy or really engage with a certain company's culture. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate? How do you get to know that company culture before you go start talking and looking at candidates?
And you're absolutely, and there's nothing taboo about it, because the fit is, and it's not a good, or it's not a gender thing or race thing or anything like that. It's just how we communicate to each other. But to your question, when I am asked to engage in a search, I will spend, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour on that initial intake, hopefully with the hiring manager involved, because it's like the old telephone game. Yes, they told the recruiter or whomever I'm talking to what they're looking for, but then sometimes I'll go back even after that, if it's an internal recruiter, let's say, and go back and have another 20-minute conversation with the manager and learn what are those 3 or 4 things you really want. So my intakes are long, but that's because it's hard to dig deep because people aren't used to those kind of questions a lot of times, from a recruiter. They just want to know that they have this and this. But that's what they're paying me to do. Right. And I also, whenever possible, visit the client. Even if it's just an office, they go, oh, we're just a bunch of offices and cubes. But, I can spend 20 minutes in an office and get a feel for the vibe, whether it's high energy, what the workforce looks like, what it feels like. You get that vibe. And I tell my clients, I say, look, me visiting on site is going to help you help me in filling your search quicker. It just does. Because when you talk to the candidate, you can say, here's what to expect. So I get to know them well. And then when I submit candidates, I always ask, at least for the first few submittals, said, well, I'm going to talk to you about this person. I'm not just going to send you a resume with a write-up. We're going to present in person. I'll send you the write-up. I have no problem with that. But I'd like to present them in person so we can get a dialogue going. So I can tell you, maybe their resume doesn't look right, their background, but here's why I think they're good for it. So it's an extensive process up front, but it certainly pays off instead of having to hit and miss and, as we say, throw things against the wall. Instead of having to go through 20 resumes, maybe we go through 5 resumes until we hone in on that person. So that's how I like to operate.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. 25 years ago, I founded Imperative to help risk-averse companies make well-informed decisions about the people they involve in their business. And to be honest, many of our clients came to Imperative after they got burned by a cheap background check, and then they were referred by their attorney, their HR consultant, or another trusted advisor. Because our research is more thorough and our reporting more robust, it's sometimes hard for an employer searching for a new background screening partner to conduct an apples-to-apples comparison of Imperative to other screening companies. So we've compiled a short list of 6 questions that you should ask any prospective screening partner to ensure that you understand what they're really trying to sell you. These questions identify the most common ways background check companies cut corners that impact the quality, accuracy, and depth of the information they provide employers. You can review the 6 questions you should ask of your background check partner at imperativeinfo.com/6. And of course, you can always reach out to Imperative to discuss your background check process through our website at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 166 and enter the keyword recruiter. That's RECRUITER. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Mike Kahn. So I think often in the hiring process, the weakest link is that hiring manager, because they think HR ought to have a drawer full of fully qualified candidates that you can just reach in and pull out at any time and put somebody in there. Yep. And often we don't do a good job, I think, of training them to really be good managers and especially good interviewers and understand what they're really looking for. What value can a recruiter bring to bringing those skills up for a hiring manager?
So a good recruiter will understand the market, understand what they're looking for, and if what they're looking for is realistic. And an effective recruiter will come back and say, let me be very candid with you. And I think candor is something that's often missing because you're like, oh, they're my client. Customer's always right, whatever they say. But if you're a recruiter and you're not saying, let me tell you, this is the most in-demand job we source for. And, either your compensation is about 20% below market. These folks, 90% of them work a hybrid schedule. And literally, if you have people coming in 5 days a week, you are cutting out 40% of your potential candidates. Things like that. You've got to educate your client, not school them, be a partner with them. But you have to have the nerve, and I'll use that word, to push back on them and say what you're looking for is just not realistic. And sometimes you don't even take the job, but the client that understands that and partners with you on that, they're going to be your best client and they're going to respect you. And guess what? They're going to call you the next time they have a job too. So that to me is a difference. And maybe, 30 plus years of experience in HR, it's easier for me to say than some of my colleagues, but that's what's going to make an effective recruiter is be a real consultant to you and not just a resume provider.
So where does that consulting really start? I mean, is it really just at, when you first take that engagement, or when, if I'm in-house, when that manager reaches out and says, I've got this approved rec, I need to post this job. And then what does it look like throughout the cycle? What kinds of consulting or, assistance should a recruiter be giving throughout the cycle there?
So internally or externally, I don't think there's a big difference in the process in what happens. So we can talk both. For both of them, it starts at the very beginning intake. Ask the questions that of them. So, what communication style works best for you? What are your pet peeves? I ask candidates that all the time. Tell me what bugs you about people, or in a resume. What don't you like? What do you look for in a resume? Even kind of off the topic or off the specific type. So you should do that from the very beginning and all through the process. And that's why I mentioned before, I, whenever possible, present candidates in person because that creates a dialogue. I'll say, here's why I think this person is good. And the client can look at, we can have a dialogue. Email is not a dialogue. Text is not a dialogue. And so they can say, well, I'm looking at this. I'm concerned about this. Oh, well, here's the reason for that. I asked them about that, and here's why that's like it is. And I don't think that should be a concern. Matter of fact, I asked them on your behalf, if this fits. So all the way through, you are doing that check and having that dialogue when you present those first couple of folks, take a pause, get that feedback. That's going to help you say, okay, you know what? I just heard from you that I've not heard before. And guess what? People change. They learn from candidates. And so sometimes they will realize, I thought this was important in the candidate. When I first set this up, I realized it really is nothing I can't train in 30 minutes. So no, I guess that's not a requirement anymore. I don't need that. So that's all through the process, whether you're an internal corporate recruiter or an outside consultant like me.
Are there differences between the roles that an external recruiter would play in that process and an internal recruiter?
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
I mean, there really should. Just because you work with the same company, you may have an insight on the culture and this manager, and you see him in operation. But if you don't understand that, if you've never worked with that manager, or you've never worked with this division, maybe it's a different division you've never worked with, you need to educate yourself just like I do when I call a company.
So what are let's say it's a company that has an HR department and they've got some recruiting function too. What are the circumstances where an executive search firm or a professional recruiting firm would be maybe a better option than just relying on your internal recruiters?
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, if it is a highly specialized field, industry, that's a time where maybe, you've never recruited any, nuclear scientist before. And all of a sudden, you made an acquisition, you need nuclear scientists. Let's talk to an outside firm that specializes in that. So maybe, there's an area that you don't have a lot to choose from. Maybe it's a confidential search. We often get, somebody unfortunately has to be replaced internally, but we can't let them go yet. So we have to keep it very, very quiet. Our company can't be open about it so that out of respect to that individual, they don't kind of realize, wait, that's my job, So we can do it on their behalf without even saying the name. And we're a service. We're a service provider. Maybe you've got 80 recs, 80 maybe exaggerated, 40 recs on your desk. 30 of those are the same type of jobs that you know very well, but there's some outliers that are just as critical, and it's in the best interest from a time and a knowledge standpoint. Let's farm those couple of jobs out, and I can focus on getting these 30 IT analysts in here for this project. But this one very specialized area, we can go outside, and time is money. We ask people, what's the cost of not filling this job? And that's where we come into play, because that's a question not everybody asks, but people go, well, I guess you're right. If it sits for 2 or 3 months unfilled versus 4 or 6 weeks, that's costing me money.
Yeah, especially if it's production related, right? Yeah, it's helping us get services or goods out the door. Yeah.
Right. So, or maybe like I said, sales before, if that territory goes unstaffed for 6 weeks, how much does that cost you? So we supplement recruiters and staffing divisions, staffing departments. We don't replace them by any means. And it's just another you look at your tools and you say, what's the best use of my tools, and the staffing firms, the professional staffing firms or entry, whatever, we're a good tool to use. And that's the people that call us.
Are you seeing, we've got more generations working in the, workforce than we've had probably ever, from Gen Z all the way to boomers who will not let go. How much difference is there in how you talk to an emerging professional versus somebody who's really seasoned? Is there, or are they pretty much going through the same kind of process?
It's the same process, Mike. As I mentioned before, when I speak with people, I do as little talking as possible, because all I do is prompt the questions, and the answers are what makes a difference. It's not the question that makes a difference. So any generation that I'm talking to, it's questions like, what's important to you? Where have you made the biggest impact? Even if I speak with an HR generalist, little g's, whether VP or director or whatever, I will say, there's 7 disciplines within HR, like training and development, talent acquisition, employee relations and such. But when you think about it, which areas do you feel you've really excelled and, quite frankly, enjoy doing more than others? And people are candid with me. They'll say, I love talent acquisition, really don't want to get involved in payroll or benefits. And then other people say, I love benefits, I love payroll. Employee relations is not my thing. I can manage it, and I'm happy to oversee it. But, and that gives you some insight too into them. So the process doesn't vary. Every time I call a candidate, I remind them, I'm not just calling you about this one job. Or when I call a client to reach out about if they have any openings, sometimes, a lot of times, it turns both ways. So whether as a candidate or having a job to fill. So the conversation, the process really shouldn't vary by generation.
Are there differences in what you're seeing as far as expectations of employees by generation? Or, I've always been skeptical of putting people saying men want this, women want this, or things like that. And I think you can unfairly lump groups together by age too. But do you see differences in expectations between younger professionals and older ones?
The biggest, kind of elephant in the room is a hybrid schedule and remote schedules. That's not necessarily generational. I have some younger clients who want to be in an office because they don't have a good workspace at home or whatever. I have some very seasoned folks that say, look, I paid my dues. I've started working from home. My kids are expecting me every day when they get off the bus. I don't want to give that up. But it's kind of interesting talking about generations, if I may. People forget, even before, of course, COVID was a change, was a big aha moment that we can work remotely. Our employees can work effectively remotely. But you remember before then when we talked about the millennials. It's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them? They want to leave every day at 4:30 because they have a yoga class at 5.
That I may be teaching, so they need to get
exactly.
there. Yeah.
There you go. We were both big yoga advocates. I forgot about that. But guess what? That millennials, when they get home at 8 o'clock, they're going to log in again, and you may get an email from them at 10 o'clock at night. They'll go back, but they had their perspective, in my opinion, right. They did have a work-life balance, and that call for remote and hybrid, particularly from that generation, started way before COVID. And COVID just gave them a manifestation to say, see, we were right. It can be done.
And we talk about millennials like they're young, but they are compared to you and me. But I mean, I think the oldest millennials are in their early 40s now. So it's not like they're, and I can tell you, on the flip side, you were kind enough to help my son, who's an engineer, who moved to Houston, make some connections and talk about his job search. He's active, he's really interested in being on site. He feels the need to have that mentorship, and, he wants to advance his career. And I'm hearing that more and more. Especially, most of my contact with, the Gen Z workforce is through my yoga studio. And I'm, because a lot of the teachers are in that group and a lot of the students are, and I'm talking to them. And a lot of them, as soon as they find out I'm an HR, guy, they're like, okay, so here's what I'm trying to figure out. How do I get back in the office? I'm hearing it from my friends about their own kids too.
Wow.
I want to, maybe I spent a horrible year isolated during college, during COVID, working from home. Yeah. I mean, my son's an engineer, went to UT, and he did his engineering labs at home. They sent him kits, and I'm like, I'm glad you're not a civil engineer, because I don't ever drive across a bridge a civil engineer who did all his work remote would design.
On his bed in his bedroom,
right? Exactly, yeah. And so, but they spent that year, and I think they're looking for connection, and that's where you meet. Good. That's where you meet other adults. Is at work, and so.
Well, that's interesting, because I was just talking to somebody last week, and they said, they're moving to Houston. They want a job, and they want to be inside. They said, it's kind of my social circles. I know nobody in Houston, and you're spot on. I want to get I look for somebody I can socialize. So I would like a diverse demographic that includes some folks kind of in my generation and such. So no, that's a very good observation.
Well, I really appreciate your time. We're right up on half an hour. It flew by, but it's always great to visit with you, and thank you for sharing with the audience. All of Mike's contact information will be in the show notes and on the website, and I encourage you, if you have needs, reach out to him. He's an all-star guy.
Thanks, Mike. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Just what I expected with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.